Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. Joining me today, the professor himself in the house, Mr. James Eng. James, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Paul.
So any big plans coming down the pike for Thanksgiving, which is just right around the corner for you, James?
I think we're going to stay local. So I don't think we're going to have a big gathering around the table this year, just immediate family, and that's it. So I got 3 boys, so that's plenty of people for me.
That is a lot of fun just to hang around the family, but you've been doing that for 9 months. So, but at least another couple more months before this vaccine gets pushed out to the general public, and hopefully some people will start to take that, and we see a decline in the numbers. But just a very interesting year this year when it comes to just the health of the country. The election has been very strange, but let's talk about some things that have been very positive. Let's talk a little bit about multifamily. So, James, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in the economy right now. What are you seeing in lending? Tell me just kind of the big picture coming from the professor.
Yeah, I think the lending has come back pretty strong. The overall sales volume sort of year to date is down probably about 40-50% nationwide in terms of multifamily sales. But surprisingly, in Dallas, in Atlanta, in Phoenix, in those markets, all that money coming from California and New York has shifted to those markets. So those markets are actually in very good shape, and those are where we have people, and that's where we do a lot of loans. So it's been great. And then in terms of financing, I guess the big news probably right now is, Fannie and Freddie, they've done a lot of business this year. So they have not really shut their doors compared to a lot of bridge and CMBS lenders shut down in the second quarter, even the third quarter. And we're seeing those people come back to the market. But Fannie and Freddie they just kept going. They added reserves, but besides that, they've kept going. So we just got news about their new caps for next year, and that is down a little bit. So they had about $80 billion last year, or this year in 2020. Next year, they'll have $70 billion, and their focus will be still on that affordable B and C space. So the space that we're in. So we're going to see.
What does that mean? Because, they have different criteria or quota that they have to meet in that space of kind of the affordability. Can you kind of go a little bit more detail on that one?
Yeah, I wish it was an easy calculation, but essentially they look at the zip code, they look at the average median income in that zip code, and then if it hits some thresholds, I think it's like 60% or 80%. There's different levels that they have, and then if it does qualify, then that's considered sort of mission rich for Fannie and Freddie, and so their goal for 2021 or target that they need to hit is 50% of their business needs to be affordable. So
so that really is a
range.
space. Yeah. If you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking about buying into or investing in B and C multifamily properties, that is the direction that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac really want to go. They really want to help folks that are tenants in these properties, to help the landlords try to get better rates, better terms of their loans. And so they are looking for mission rich, which is just like what James said, affordability, has some form of affordability or have different income threshold for the tenants. And so it's not low income housing. It is housing for you and I, but it just is, they want to make sure that it meets the needs of the rest of the country. So it's really not, you'll stick it in some institutional, like class A plus properties, maybe in some general areas, but it's really for B and C properties.
Yeah, just to give you an example, we're closing a B minus deal right now here in DFW, and the pricing that Freddie gave on it was better than A minus stuff that we're doing. So
no kidding.
It's just one of those. It's just one of those things that it doesn't necessarily make as much sense, but Fannie and Freddie's direction is that way, so they're gonna be a little bit more aggressive on pricing and maybe IO on some of those deals. Whereas as you move up the scale, let's say to B plus or A minus, where the rents are, let's say in Dallas, $1,300, $1,400, $1,500, those spreads are going to be a little bit wider.
Talk to me a little bit about the Old Capital Speaker Series. I mean, that's always been such a great attended event. How did it go this for November, and what does December look like? And tell me a little bit about why some people should RSVP for the December event.
Yeah, I mean, the Old Capital Conference that we had in October was sort of like an experiment to see, can virtual work, can it help you network? Can it help you get educated in the multifamily space? And we had 300-400 people on for that conference in October. And then so in November, we brought in Greg Willett to really give us a deep dive into 6 markets. And so the 4 majors in Texas, and then we went out to Atlanta and Phoenix. So he broke down those markets, but then we also had an hour of virtual networking before and an hour after. And so I think that allows people to not only meet people in their city, but it's bringing in people from all over the nation. And so before we used to have 300-400 people in Dallas in a big conference room. Can't do that now. So we're expanding the speaker series. So, I wouldn't say get in or have your camera on and have your mic on. So definitely don't be in your pajamas, but it helps coming in live. So, I think for the next one, so we just had Greg Willett, had about 500 people register for that event. The next one is going to be Wednesday, December 2nd at 6:00 Central. So if you go to oldcapitalpodcast.com, you can register right there.
Tell us a little bit more. I mean, the speaker series is fantastic, but also too, you do a great job on the educational videos that people want to watch, want to get smart on. The lender brings in 70-80% of the money. So talk a little bit more about the Old Capital YouTube platform and channel.
Yeah, the Old Capital YouTube, a lot of times, like at night, if I'm watching something, a lot of times it's hard to understand a concept on financing or on a market. Sometimes you just need a picture. And so I usually put a slide deck together, or a lot of the guys at Old Capital, we've been putting market updates and interviews with different people. And a lot of times we'll share our screen and go through it. And so if you go over to the Old Capital YouTube page, it'll have those videos. And then we're going to try to break out different concepts there. So I don't know how many times I've got a question on how do I fill out a PFS or schedule of real estate. So some of those basic questions will be on there, but then also in-depth concepts going through, all right, how do I do a Fannie Mae loan or a Freddie Mac loan? Or what's the difference between the two? And what should I be aware of? Should I be doing fixed versus float? All those different concepts. I'll refer people to those videos a lot of times because I can't say it perfect every time on the phone, but sure, the video typically does a pretty good job on it.
Yeah, it's just not 1 or 2 videos that are uploaded. We have lots and lots of videos. So if you're looking to make that transition from television over to YouTube, which a lot of people are, spend some time at the Old Capital YouTube channel and just get yourself as smart as you can when it comes to financing or it comes to anything that we're talking about in the multifamily space. So again, go to the YouTube channel, Old Capital Lending. So if you think we bring value to the conversation and you're listening to us on the Old Capital podcast, go into iTunes or Stitcher and give us a 5-star rating. We certainly would appreciate that. Go into the oldcapitalpodcast.com website and download the 17-page white paper report that James Eng, the professor, and Michael Becker and I wrote that we continue to get updated. In fact, the new update comes out here in about 2 weeks for 2021. So we're looking forward for you to download that about what's going on with financing and our take on what you need to know. So hopefully you'll be able to download that. So in the podcast today, something completely different. We're talking to Clay Allen. So Clay Allen just joined Old Capital a couple months ago. We haven't really spent any time with Clay, but I want you to get to know him. He brings a lot to the table, not just loan officer, commercial real estate loan officer for Old Capital, but you really wanted to listen to his background, what he's done for the last, say, 10 or 15 years, what his experience level is, where he's located at, how he can help you, and just try to develop a relationship. So at this period of time, I'm going to throw it over to James and to Clay. And Clay, thanks for being on the team.
Thank you, Paul.
So maybe to kick it off, just give us a little bit of your background, sort of where you were born and raised, and how you came to hear about Old Capital a couple of years ago.
Yeah, thanks, James. So born and raised in Georgia, Albany, Augusta, and Athens. I call Athens my hometown. grew up a big Georgia Bulldog fan, and still am, but had to get out of town for college. I went to Samford University in Birmingham. I had a great experience at Samford, and that's where I kind of kicked off my finance career in real estate, if you will. I started in a 2-year internship program my junior year in college, and quick funny story about that. In my first 15 minutes on the job, I was standing in front of her, or right behind a teller, a bank teller, being introduced to her. She was being robbed at the time. And so I was staring down this guy who was robbing the teller that I was being introduced to 15 minutes into my banking career. But despite that, I stuck it out for the next 2 years and went to full-time banking, if you will, with South Trust Bank in Birmingham, and landed into the senior living real estate group. We call it the healthcare real estate group. And back then it was kind of a new concept, the CCRCs and assisted living. So that's how I got introduced to real estate lending, and found that I wanted to get more into general commercial real estate. So back in 2001, I transferred with the bank back to Atlanta, a little bit closer to home, being the hub of the Southeast for real estate, and proved to be a great move. I miss all the people in Birmingham, but it was a great move professionally. So if you're looking at my career, high level, I'd say about 23 years, of which 9 or 10 years were in the banks. 9 or 10 years were at GE Capital, James, with you, in various capacities. I was in the joint venture equity group, where we provide, say, a 90-10 joint venture arrangement to some large owner-operators of multifamily. The music ended there back in 2008, 2009, and so I became an asset manager for a while on our equity interest, and then made my way to the underwriting side, where we were doing CMBS and portfolio loans. That's when I joined James, your group, in the East Coast. So fantastic time there. The music stopped at GE. They pulled the plug back in 2015 and gave us plenty of notice. And at that point, I just wanted to transition a little bit out of finance, just for the sake of getting some experience on the GP side. And so I worked for 2 large multifamily owner operators in the capacity of an asset manager. And the markets that I generally covered were Southeastern markets: Raleigh, Charlotte, Atlanta, of course, was my biggest market. Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Jacksonville, and Nashville, but also went up to, for a short period, up to Boston, New Jersey, Chicago, Columbus. So kind of been around the last 5 years, really focused on sharpening my skills from a GP perspective, if you will.
Okay. I want to focus in on probably 2 parts of that background. I want to talk a little bit about the equity side, what GE did, right? So you were on the other side of the house. So GE, I would say, had a debt side and an equity side. And the debt side is where we provided bridge loans, so 3 to 5 year loans at 70, 75%. And then we also provided CMBS loans. So those were 70 to 75% on stabilized properties.
Yeah, give a perspective. A lot of people, they've heard of GE, General Electric, whether they made airplane engines or they owned NBC television at the time. Right. But, you guys work for one of the largest financing companies of commercial real estate in the world.
Right.
All across the world. And so, James, again, define what you did, and then I'll let you help Clay define what he did.
Yeah, I mean, so GE had a capital division, and the GE Capital started financing household appliances. So they would finance your refrigerator or your washer and dryer, and then that slowly spun into financing airplane engines, and then eventually they got into the commercial real estate space. And they had about, at the top in 2007, 2008, they probably had close to 100 billion in assets. And half of that was in equity and half of that was in debt. And so I was on the debt side and Clay was on the equity side. And so if you came to GE, you could get a bridge loan, you could get a CMBS loan from my side of the shop, or if you needed help on the equity side, you could go to Clay's side of the house and get equity. So that's where I wanted to spend probably a little bit of time, Clay, is what did you do on the equity side at GE there?
Sure. So I was more or less in an underwriting capacity. We had people going out and forming the relationships with the owner operators really throughout the U.S., all the U.S. markets. We were based here in Atlanta, so we covered the Southeast. So we had originators. I would skin every deal that came through. So I tallied it up at one point. In total cap, I underwrote about $3 billion worth of deals that we were looking at. Probably closed on less than 200 million in equity, that is, in joint venture equity.
So the 200
$200 million
in equity, GE was putting in 90% of the stack, and then the operator was putting in the 10% of the stack. Is that right?
Yeah, and keep in mind this. I came on board in 06, 08 happened, so it wasn't a long run. So that when I say 200 million, don't be too surprised by that. But yeah, skinned a lot more than what we actually closed on.
Okay, all right. And then so after equity shut down, you sort of moved over to the asset management side. What did you sort of learn maybe at GE? Was there anything in particular that you learned there in terms of managing the manager, I guess you could say, on the asset management side?
Yeah, a little bit. And I'll tell you, I learned a lot more once I joined that capacity on the GP side. But yeah, I did put my toe in the water of asset management. But when you're a joint venture equity player and the owner operator is the one responsible for the day-to-day, they're coming reporting to you, you get just a little bit of the sense of how messy the business can be sometimes on the operations side. You really find out once you get on the GP side. You get to that day-to-day and you start getting those calls from the property manager and really understanding what the issues are. But when you're the large equity provider, you're probably not getting told the full story on a daily basis.
So they're calling you when we want to sell, we want to refi, we got a big problem.
Exactly.
We need more money.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, we had to approve budgets, of course, but I would say we kept it pretty high level from an asset management perspective on the GP side.
Okay. And then, so you moved over to a larger group that managed owned and managed like 20,000 plus units across the nation.
Yeah, probably closer to 30,000, about 100 properties and Sunbelt related, based in Austin, Texas, CWS Capital, great group of people. But yeah, they took down about 100 deals or so. They started off in the manufactured housing space and slowly grew from that. And I think GE was, I might be wrong about this, so hopefully I'm not saying this wrong, but I think GE may have been the first institutional capital that they tapped into. And so we were there when they started their foray into the multifamily space.
Okay. And then
and I should say too, I'm sorry, you asked about my experience on the GP side. I went from CWS to a group called Harbor Group out of Norfolk, Virginia. And there, when I left there, I had 34 properties and about 11,000 units. So say pretty busy there.
So talk about that experience. I know we spent a little time on that, but in terms of what you actually did as an asset manager for that group and maybe top 2 or 3 things that you learned while in that seat.
So, I'd say if I'm looking at an operating rhythm, we'll start the year, let's say September, October timeframe, because that's when you're drawing up as asset manager, you're drawing up the business plan for the coming year for each property. And then you hand that document off to the property management team, which we're vertically integrated, right? So we would hand that off to our counterparts on the property management side, and we'd say, this is the general framework by which we want to see the budget drawn. So we give them some guardrails, if you will, on expense growth, on rent growth, what we want to see. We had a construction management team that would layer in any kind of capital needs of the property. Our job at that point, again, was to draw the business plan, then review and approve the budget, make tweaks where we'd have to. So obviously that was done on an annual basis. Throughout the time, every month, you're obviously reviewing financial statements, operating statements, challenging the team on metrics, and then reporting. Really one of the most important jobs as an asset manager, as a GP, for any GPs listening, is obviously communicating with the investor. So in this case, it really depended on the investor. Again, I had a lot of properties, but I had some investors that wanted a weekly call. I had some that wanted monthly calls and some quarterly and some not at all. They just wanted to go on with their day and just anything back came up, let me know. But that was
take a pause real quick, Clay?
Yeah.
So let's say you had 30 properties. Mm-hmm. Was the equity the same across the 30 properties, or was the equity different in each one of those properties to some extent?
And when you say that in terms of was it fund driven or?
Yeah, where was the equity coming out of one individual? Was it coming out of a syndication? Was it coming out of a fund? And was it different places? I'm just wondering.
So we had family office money. We also had institutional capital, but we were fund driven. So we would have a fund where we would dump all of our investments, and we would also go out and buy Freddie B notes and put it in the same fund. We would target a general return, but we didn't have any syndicated money that went into the fund.
Okay. All right. So I guess in your role, you're setting budgets, you're doing the reporting. I mean, any big things that you came across during that process, or what were some of those key learnings that you had while doing that for the last couple of years?
Well, I said earlier it's a messy business, and I don't say that at all to dissuade anybody from getting into it. Just know that you are dealing with people, and people are messy, right? And so I had some humorous stories in the past. I've had some just like, where did that come from type stories. I had one. We had a office tower here in Atlanta where we did about a $25,000-$30,000 renovation on a clubhouse, and I got a call from the property or the regional manager the next morning. She said, "Clay, we have an issue. We had someone about 2:00 in the morning dressed as a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle trash our all of our new clubhouse fixtures." So
was it Halloween?
No. This is Atlanta, James. No, we're the city that never sleeps in the South. So no, it was just the most random things. I had a lift pump that went out that was supposed to be a $30,000 issue that turned into a $450,000 issue. So things like that, I think, expect the unexpected. So that needs to be reflected in anyone's underwriting, I think.
A lot of the people who listen to this podcast, they're used to us talking about Texas markets, and maybe spend some time giving us an overview of maybe compare and contrast the, let's say, Dallas market with the Atlanta market, and give us some insight into what you're seeing in that market right now.
Sure. I don't know how to contrast too much, because I know that we're experiencing a lot of the same. You guys are probably seeing a lot more California money pour into Dallas than we're seeing, although we are seeing that here in North Carolina. But we see a lot of New York and New Jersey money. That's not a new phenomenon, but it is kind of picking up given the pandemic era here. But generally, we're seeing good fundamentals in Atlanta. We're north of 95% occupied across the metro. The 1 weak spot, if you will, right now would be the in-town market, what we call ITP, inside the perimeter, where you have Buckhead, Midtown, some of those spots around Inman Park, where there's been a lot of development. And there might have been some move outs because of the pandemic, but seeing a little bit of weakness in rent growth. I think we're down 5% year over year inside the perimeter, but overall across the metro, we're up slightly, call it 0.5% in rents. So not a bad story. I tell you what, if you told me this, say this time last year, November, we would go through a pandemic and we would have a large spike in unemployment. I would not believe that we would be where we are right now.
Where do you think some of the stronger submarkets in Atlanta are right now, or where are you seeing strength in maybe for B and C properties? What submarkets do you like in Atlanta?
So B and C, the most action I'm seeing right now is in Marietta and also Peachtree Corners. I'll tell you that, and I'll come back to that, but where you have seen remarkable rent growth has been on the South Side. The South Side has been ignored for a long time by institutional capital, but it's definitely got the institutional capital's attention now. I think a lot of that is all this freight that's moving up from the Savannah River, Savannah Port of Savannah. It's moving up I-16 to 75 and it's parking all that inventory and all the warehouses down there along 75, 85. And from there, it gets pushed up 85 to Charlotte, up to Nashville. And so you're seeing just a lot of growth up that way, even in markets like Greenville and Chattanooga because of that. So really the South Side is benefiting from it. Where you see the stress on the South Side is closer to the airport, obviously for very obvious reasons. But I was talking to my prior employer 2 weeks ago or last week, and he said, we just looked back at rents for the 7 properties we have on the South Side last year, over the past year, 8% rent growth. Now we corrected some issues that we had early on this time last year, but to see that is just remarkable given where we are in the world today.
What do you think, in terms of people and, that market? What are you seeing? You've been at Old Capital now for a couple months, and I guess what type of deals are you working on? What type of, support are you giving people in terms of investors? If they're local, what are you doing for them? If they're out of state, how are you helping investors? Give us some examples.
Sure. So, I mentioned there's even California money going into North Carolina. I'm looking at 3 deals right now, either Nevada or California money that are looking for deals in North Carolina and South Carolina. And so working on, and these are small deals, by the way, but working on small deals for them. And here in Georgia, here in Atlanta, I'm seeing a wide variety, right? Very, very large transactions, very small transactions. I'm looking at a lot of stuff and trying to help where I can. That I'm trying to support by way of going and visiting the property. If someone's out of state, I'm happy to go drive by and put some eyes on it, take some pictures. Just yesterday, I offered one of my clients just a chance to do what you do, James, on YouTube. Just spend 30 minutes just walking through how I would go through, how I would underwrite an acquisition and how a lender might look at it, and just offer it up to that particular group of people. It's 4 people in their sponsorship group. Gives them an opportunity just to ask one-on-one questions. So yeah, that's the type of deals I'm looking for, type of support I'm trying to provide.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times, people take classes and things like that, and they've been doing this for 2 or 3 months, and, they're ready to buy a $20 million deal. Clay and I and Paul, we've been doing this a little bit longer than that. And so I just wanted you guys to hear a little bit more about Clay's background and what he's seeing in the Atlanta market, because I think there's a wealth of knowledge. We could probably spend a couple hours talking about deals and properties all throughout Atlanta with Clay. But I appreciate you coming on, Clay, to give us a little background.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Paul. It was an honor to be on the podcast. I didn't think I'd ever make it.
Oh, you're on it right now, so that's great. So, I mean, if you listen to Clay and what he is talking about, is his background is very diverse. So he comes out of a banker's background. He lives in the South. He lives in Atlanta, and he covers areas of not just Georgia, but South Carolina, North Carolina, and the upper portion of Florida too. And so if you have a transaction that you want to kind of understand, underwrite, have us underwrite the transaction, have somebody actually maybe physically drive the property if you are in Ohio or you are in California, rely upon Clay to be kind of your eyes and ears of the transaction. Of course, he's going to want you to underwrite the deal first and see how you look at the deal. Just don't throw it on Clay's lap and have him take a look at it, but underwrite the deal first and then have Clay grade your report to see if it makes sense or not. But again, he has a banking background. He has been an asset manager. That's really where the sausage is being made. So a lot of these transactions get put in the hands of an asset manager to make these deals run correctly or smoothly. Imagine the type of knowledge that Clay has by managing 30 plus assets in the South. What could you learn? How could you pick his brain to kind of figure out what that's all about? And then, he was part of the equity decision tree over at GE Capital. So if you were at some period of time, if you were like a buyer of not just your 5th or your 6th or your 7th deal, and you're looking for somebody to kind of understand how equity is brought into these transactions. And again, I'm not talking about your first deal, your second deal, or third deal. They're looking for equity investors that put money into these transactions with you. One big, large check that goes in. They're looking for round trips, making sure that you bought a property, you operated the property correctly, and then you sold it and you made some money. They're looking for some track record. And that's what Clay can help you understand of what an institutional equity investor is looking for on maybe your 5th, 6th, or 7th deal. So, pick his brain down there. And also too, and probably the biggest thing is that, as you know, Old Capital works with borrowers. And so if you're thinking about getting into Atlanta or South Carolina, North Carolina, or upper portion of Florida, and you don't have a relationship with a real estate broker, somebody that actually sells multifamily in those spaces, talk with Clay. Clay will tell you who the most active persons are in those marketplaces that you can build a relationship with. So you could go fishing in a big pond to try to figure out who the big fish are, but talk with Clay because this is what he does on a day in, day out basis and helps you guide you to the right people that can get you what you need. So Clay, we certainly do appreciate you being on the Old Capital team. What a very diverse background, and we are very proud that you have chosen to work with us. And again, if somebody wanted to get more information from you, Clay, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Great. Yeah. So 2 ways. By phone is totally fine. My direct cell phone, 678-357-2631. And email is callen, that's ALLEN, at oldcapitallending.com.
That's great. James, any final thoughts or words?
No, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, this is definitely a team sport. So whether it's lending, whether it's, connecting with listing brokers, property managers, attorneys, inspectors, all that, Clay has all that. He's been in the market a long time. So he sort of can be your eyes and ears there. And so I think some of the tribal knowledge that we have in Texas, he can bring that to you in Atlanta. So I think that's a huge thing. And I would say, go out to the website if you haven't and register for the next speaker series with Casey Conway on December 2nd.
Yeah, and give me just 2 seconds on Casey Conway. What is his background, and why should people RSVP to that event?
So Casey Conway, I've only heard him one time, and it was great. And so I think he's going to bring he's based in Atlanta, right, Clay? And
Yep.
He's been an economist, an appraiser. He's worked at the Fed. And so I think he's going to give you some different metrics to look at and share some insight that not the normal economist will have. And so I wanted to bring him in. It'll be the first time for the Old Capital crowd. And so definitely get in there and register and see everybody. Hopefully we have another 500 people on December 2nd.
Oh, I think you're going to have more than that, James. So some great information from the professor, James Zhang. We certainly do appreciate you joining us in the podcast, James. And then our newest member for the Old Capital team down in Atlanta, make sure you use Clay as your tool to get more information about what's going on there. Have him look at the transaction, see what type of a debt it sizes up, maybe some equity down the road too, but definitely use his experience, leverage his experience to help you and make you more successful. So Clay Allen, thanks. Again, I'm Paul Peebles. Thanks for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.